Happy Monday. Hopefully everyone's doing well. Today, I am over the moon excited to welcome my real estate lawyer. Her name's Svenya. She does an incredible job and she's extremely knowledgeable. And the question I get the most is, do you have a real estate lawyer? So I do. I'm going to introduce you and we're going to guide the process. So some things that you should know and how it works when you're getting into the market is you start off the process with me, and realistically, the starting place is to get a pre-approval. So if you don't have a good mortgage team, I can definitely refer you to mine, but you want to make sure that you're shopping within your category and how much you're looking to spend, and we shop within your means. Once we find a property that is right up your alley, this is what takes place. I would then send the listing over to the mortgage broker and verify that, once again, what we're shopping for is what we should be shopping for. Financially, you won't be too strained, is what we want to verify, and that your pre-approval is accurate. Once we do that, I personally reach out to the listing agent, touch base with them, and just make sure that we kind of have a meeting of the minds. Once we verify the property is, of course, still on the market, I then go ahead and draft your offer. Once your offer is drafted, definitely you and I go over it to make sure it is exactly what you're looking for. And then furthermore, I explain it to you, you sign it, and what would happen next is we submit your offer. If and when your offer is accepted, of course, offers could be a little bit back and forth, you negotiate. Once your offer is successfully accepted, a few things can happen. It all depends whether you went into the offer with conditions or without. If you haven't gone in with conditions, then the firm contracts goes directly to the lawyer, and that's when they kick in. If you have conditions, regardless, I would give the lawyer team the heads up that we do have a conditional offer, depending on what it's conditional of, aka it could be conditional of status certificate. If that's the case, then we go about ordering the status certificate. It could take up to 10 days to come in, and once the status certificate arrives, that's when the lawyer kicks in and she starts reviewing it. Now, we're getting very close in the process to where the lawyer kind of takes over. Please help me welcome her, and in her own words, she'll tell you everything you have to know. Hi, Svenya. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm so excited to have you here because you are a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure is all mine. So I have so many questions for you. Are you ready?
Of course.
Okay. So what do you do? Like, why would someone specifically need a real estate lawyer?
Okay. So a real estate lawyer in Ontario basically conveys the property. So whether it's a sale or a purchase transaction, you do need a lawyer to assist you. I mean, there's a lot of title defects that could be detected by a lawyer, and that is extremely crucial to sort of navigate you through the process of a real estate transaction. So that's the essence of having a lawyer by your side, and of course alongside with a real estate agent. That is extremely important as well. So that is the main reason why you should definitely retain a lawyer, because of the title defects that you can encounter these days.
Thank you for explaining that firstly. No problem. Where I am in the process is one of two steps. Either we have a conditional offer or we have a firm offer. And that's where I kind of loop you into this whole fun process and say, okay, Svenya, here's the offer. Whether it be firm or conditional, can you kind of tell me what takes place on your end from there?
Definitely. So let's maybe start with the firm one, because that's my my starting point really. If it's a firm one, I'm ready to commence work on the file really, because it's a binding agreement between the two parties. And I can definitely work on that, and I'm ready to go. When it's conditional though, it's not a binding agreement yet, but it really depends as to what the condition is stipulated in the agreement of purchase and sale. If it's a condition on the review of status certificate and the clients are interested for me to review it, that's where I step in. I review it and make sure that there are no problems. For instance, with the condominium corporation, with all the financials contained in the actual status certificate. But that's only for condominiums, right? Mm-hmm. Most of the times it's conditional upon inspection. So of course the inspector is involved here at this stage. The other reason to place a condition in the agreement would be financing. Those are the typical conditions stipulated in the agreement. So of course, financing, there's nothing I can really do. It is being submitted to the mortgage advisor, right, where they can see if the client does qualify for a mortgage, and if so, then that's where basically once the mortgage specialist approves the client for that particular mortgage, then you waive the condition in the agreement, and then once that's firm, that's when I step in.
Absolutely. So can we backtrack just a tad? For those who don't know, what is a status certificate?
Of course, definitely. So a status certificate will be relevant, of course, only in terms of condominium unit. Okay, so a freehold is that's not applicable. Status certificate only applies to condominium units. So it is a condominium document. It has to contain relevant information that complies with the Condominium Act in Ontario, and it just basically outlines the main features of the unit, the legal description, common expenses amount of the monthly payments, are they in default or not, legal proceedings, if any, against the condominium corporation, the budget, the reserve fund amounts. So that sort of basic information, but that is only, few pages that we focus on. But then there's a whole different story that comes with the status certificate. There are bylaws, there's a condominium declaration. So those are attachments to the status certificate. The status certificate is like a summary and a quick brief outline of the main issues and matters pertaining to the unit, but then of course we have to review the declaration and bylaws and rules and regulations of the condominium. So that's basically the essence of the documents.
So in plain English, just in case, I understand that there was a summary of this is what a status certificate contains. But in plain English, a status certificate is a document that will tell any potential buyer or the person that owns the unit as well, the health of not only the unit, but also the building, both financially and like the actual standing of the property. So the reason you would want to know that as a potential buyer is you want to know, is this a good investment, whether you're intending to live in it or not, or are they having financial issues? Are they going to have to redo the roof, the elevator? Is there enough in the reserve fund? A reserve fund is a fund that any condo has that only can be used for repairs, not additional things to be like, if a building doesn't have a pool and they want a pool in it, they cannot use the reserve fund to make a pool. It's only repairs.
Improvement, yes.
Exactly. So with that being said, it's important for a lawyer to go through the status certificate so you can have a better understanding of the overall health, so you can make a more informed decision whether this is going to be the right property for you or not.
Definitely. That's why we review it, so that the client can feel comfortable with purchasing that particular unit and knowing, outlining to the client all the relevant information that is crucial to make that informed decision, as you mentioned, definitely. So it's crucial to go over it, because it's not always that straightforward. The unit may look good, but then there is some particular and relevant information contained in those documents that raise red flags sometimes, that we do want to explore it with the clients so that at least they can have a better understanding of what they are purchasing.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving parts in any transaction. So it could be as simple as seeing in a listing that the listing states a parking spot is owned. And when you go into it and do all your searches, it's not owned. Those are two very big, different things, and it could impact the way you make a decision of whether you want the unit or not.
Definitely, because that changes the whole game, right? You could be under impression that you're actually purchasing maybe through 3 units, the dwelling, the locker, the parking, but then it turns out after the review, and then I also cross-reference in my other database that really comes only with 1 parking spot and no locker, or vice versa, right? So that is crucial for some clients, especially, for instance, having that parking spot or not, right? That is definitely something to look at. So we always check the legal description, and we review and cross-reference with our other database.
So now we're at a point where, let's say everything has gone firm. You get the status certificate, you've spoken to the client, the overall health of the condo, or if there is no status certificate, everything checks out, and you're now going to touch base with the client. What happens at that point?
Yes, so I find it very, very crucial to actually touch base with the client immediately. Immediately, because I find communication is key, and clients are, purchasing a property is a big deal. And some clients, the feelings that they have is anxiety, stress, uncertainty, right? So I want to make sure that the client is navigated through this process. So I touch base right away. I communicate. I address any concerns, any issues they may have, any questions, and I take it from there. So that initial contact, I'm a firm believer that this is very, very important, that initial contact with the client, so that they could understand and be well informed about the whole process. And I actually not only verbally explain things, but I want to ensure that also it is put in writing. So in case they forget about something, they could always go back, read it carefully, and in the event they have further questions, they can, of course, always reach me. But that's my starting point. I do send an engagement letter. It's called also initial letter, where I outline everything.
Yeah, it is a process that could be very overwhelming. There's a lot of steps, a lot of moving pieces. So it is important for you to kind of come in, touch base, and just let you know, hey, I exist. I'm representing you. Firstly, do you have any questions? Which you probably do. Secondly, I think when someone touches base so early in the process, like you do, it really helps to kind of soothe any concerns, any worries, any unknowns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree. And I find that clients are a little bit anxious in the beginning, and then after that initial conversation and consultation, they do feel a little bit calmer, and that helps them, helps me, and the process is very smooth. Actually, ultimately, it turns out to be a smooth process. It's not as difficult as they thought, not as complex as they initially thought it would be, right? So that first initial contact and is very crucial. And as I said, I outline the whole process so that each step is outlined there, and they could understand what's going to happen next. Because often I had questions, what's next? Because there are a little bit anxious, and that's absolutely normal. That's why I want to cover it as much as possible, and they have that outline in writing as well. So that's basically step one, initial communication. Step two would be actually finalizing the file.
Okay.
Preparing documents. Once it's finalized, then of course scheduling an appointment for signing for the client, which I advise again in a timely manner. I try not to do anything last minute unless the circumstances do not allow me to do otherwise, because sometimes, mortgage instructions come very late. But yes, we try to always initiate that scheduling and everything in a timely manner so that the client, can relax. Basically.
Can we take a little step back?
Yes.
The in between, so we discussed your initial communication with them.
Yes.
If there's a status certificate, that comes next. You'll explain that to them as well. And then I know that you were like, there's work in between that you do, and then you come in and finalize the documents.
That's right. Basically, there is a lot of work in between. Preparing the file, especially for a purchase transaction, can be very time consuming.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of steps that clients not always really know what's going on behind the scenes, because it's title search, requisitions, receiving response to requisitions, and preparing documents and addressing any issues that potentially appeared on title. So ordering title insurance and discussing any matters with the title insurer. So it's a long process, and it absorbs a lot of time. So definitely us as lawyers, real estate lawyers, we do dedicate a big, fair chunk amount of time to prepare each file. We try to be thorough as well, right? We do have to dedicate some time towards that file. So,
can we quickly touch base on title search? So on my end, I request a title search on the contract, the initial contract, to be done 2 weeks before closing. Firstly, what is a title search?
Yes, so that's customary. That typically it happens around 2 weeks prior to closing. That's sufficient time to conduct that and address any matters that appeared on title. So title search is basically investigating title, all instruments that were registered against the subject property, and making sure that the client is obtaining good title to the property, right? There's very often encumbrances registered against title, such as mortgages, but not only. There are easements, registered rights of way, rights of entry that have to be discussed with the client. Sometimes they expire, so they should be deleted from title. So we try to clean up title as well, right? So it is a process that we do have to just make sure that that client is obtaining good title to the property. And then, of course, if there are matters that have to be addressed, we always do submit a letter of requisitions to the other solicitor, to the seller's lawyer, and sort of communicate with the other solicitor about any potential defects on title that must be resolved before the closing date.
Right. So a possible defect could be something like a lien. Is that correct?
Exactly. Construction lien, that has to be resolved before the closing date. Sometimes we find very, very old mortgages registered on title that have been paid out. The client kind of doesn't know where the paperwork is. And that's kind of like a skeleton mortgage. Like you have to, trace it back to the 80s and remove that. So, but there's much more to it, really.
1,000,000%.
Yes. So
okay.
You have to ensure that basically client is obtaining good title to the property, and that title search is crucial for a potential
So now they come in, they're signing their documents. can you give me an overview of what things are typically discussed in that meeting?
Definitely. So it really depends on whether the transaction pertains to a purchase or a sale, because different set of documents will be prepared for the sale transaction and different ones for the purchase transaction. But so regardless of the documents, of course, I always explain each document. What does it contain? What does it mean? What is the relevance and, outcome of signing this document? If it's a purchase transaction, it's a little bit more complex, and the amount of documents is much more. There's much more documents than on a sale transaction, because if you are obtaining a mortgage financing, so we have title documents to convey the property to the new purchaser, to the new owners, and then we have mortgage documents, right, pertaining to the actual mortgage that is going to be placed on title. We discuss all numbers, land transfer tax, statement of adjustments, so basically all the financials during the appointment. That is crucial. I always send it up front to the client before the appointment so they can take a look at it. But then I always review it in big detail during the appointment, because clients want to know, and they typically do have a lot of questions pertaining to the numbers, to the financials of the whole transaction. So I explain thoroughly every single number, basically.
Okay.
The invoices and on the trust ledger statement, or the statement of adjustments. So that's the focus on during the appointment. We really focus on the numbers. We review every single document. I explain basically what happens on the day of closing as well, because that's usually also I find there's a little bit of confusion. What happens on the day of closing? So I explain the exchange of keys, exchange of money, exchange of documents. What is the timeline of the closing? Because that's also a little bit uncertain for many people these days. So, unfortunately, the way real estate law operates is that we have time till 5 p.m. to register a new transfer. So it could really take the whole day to close the transaction. It really all depends on many things. It's the cooperation of the other solicitor, or lack of cooperation sometimes. It's the bank that sometimes doesn't send us money until later on, closer to that 5 p.m. deadline. So there's a lot of moving parts on the day of closing. And basically, I want to always ensure that the client understands that, it could happen anytime, basically between the morning, so from the morning till 5 p.m. and sometimes even longer.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're not able to close, and there's extension.
Is there
required.
something that you recommend with closing, or things that people don't know? If you don't close on closing day, hypothetically, this is what occurs.
Yeah, so it really all depends whether clients intend to move into the property, or what rather it's a rental and they're not in a rush. And I always say it's really a matter of sort of an agreement between both parties, because sometimes things are out of our control and the parties are understanding, and they do want to cooperate, they do want to have the deal closed, and it's a matter of 1 day extension. It's a matter of an agreement between both parties. If they do want to cooperate, it's not a big deal. But sometimes there aren't as pleasant, these extensions, and we do have to extend it, and there are extension fees, because, for instance, I always make my clients aware, if it's a purchaser and we don't get money on time, we couldn't close, I do advise them that the seller's solicitor might request an extension fee. And then if the seller had a mortgage, each day is costing them, the more they wait to close, each day they have a per diem interest, right? Added to their mortgage payout. So, that is a cost that they might have to absorb. And I mean, as long as it's like the per diem, I don't see a problem because it's not a big amount and it's not a really big deal. But sometimes these extension fees are really, really cruel.
Yeah.
And it really depends who the seller is, because if it's a real resale transaction, I find it a little bit easier. But if it's a new build, it's a little bit more difficult, and the developers, the builders will not really take it lightly, and they do have extension fees, and they are all stipulated on in writing, and they don't let it go. So I do advise that in the event of a delay in closing, there might be costs associated with that, associated with the mortgage, associated with any additional costs, because let's say the sellers already are in the midst of moving, and they booked a moving truck, for instance. So now where do they go? Right, for instance. But that's like on my end. Let's say I act for the seller. I'm kind of mixing here, but there are always costs associated with those extensions, but it really depends. Sometimes there's no issues. Both parties agree to 1 day extension, and it's much more pleasant.
Yeah.
And there's no cost added to that. But again, it really, really depends. A lot of different factors are taken into account here, and the nature of the transaction as well.
Absolutely. Now, I know we're running out of time. You have a very busy day. Couldn't thank you enough for your time. But I have one more quick question if you have a moment for it.
Of course.
Can we talk about, as quick as possible, closing costs? I know a lot of people are like, well, what's the legal fees? What's the land transfer tax? What am I looking at here closing cost wise?
Definitely. Okay. So again, we have to think of each transaction as a totally separate matter, because a sale transaction involves different things than as compared to the purchase transaction, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about, for example, a sale transaction, first of all, I'm always transparent. I always give a quote verbally, then follow up in writing, so that there are no surprises. No one likes, increases of fees, right? Sometimes it's inevitable that I do have to increase because certain issues arise, but that's something, let's say, out of my control. But I do have a flat fee, and if it's a sale transaction, I quote that flat fee for dealing with the sale. And also, there's minor disbursements on a sale transaction, very minor. There's a transaction levy, some mail, postage, basically photocopying, just minor disbursements.
Yep.
Okay. But so that's the sale. Now purchase, it's more complex.
Okay.
There is my flat fee to act on a purchase and one mortgage. Then there are some extras. If it's a rental property, sometimes banks require additional documents to be registered against the title, like assignment of rents if it's an investment property. So I do have an additional fee, but I do outline that up front. And then we have those disbursements. So most of them belong to the government. So the government charges, yes, for title search. So there are title search fees. We have registration fees to register each, transfer, charge, whatever the case is. Of course, transfer, as always transfer. Then we have land transfer tax.
Yes.
Then we have title insurance. So it sort of all adds up.
Yep.
I try to give an estimate as much as possible so that the clients have an idea. I actually try to even add extra just in case, to be on the safer side, so
a
that
buffer.
Yes, exactly. So that clients are not disappointed, because it might be a little bit extra. Then I don't like to underquote.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to always give a fair estimate that it could be between this and this. So if it's on the lower end, that's great, but it could be actually on the higher end as well. Yeah. Depending what kind of property it is, how complex the title search is. Because the title search could be anywhere between, $50 to sometimes 150 or 200. It really depends. It really depends on the nature of the property and what are we dealing with.
And
So-
who we're dealing with.
Exactly.
Right.
So that's basically, in terms of the purchase, again, I say legal fees and estimate disbursements. And this is what my disbursements are, that I have to incur on behalf of clients and to expect that estimate amount, right?
Yep.
And then I do follow up with clients. And once I have a more accurate amount, I also try to, advise the client so that they are aware. Like the specifics, it really all depends on the purchase price / sale price. So that I cannot comment on.
Yeah.
But yes.
Do we have like a split second just to quickly talk about land transfer?
Yes.
Okay. Shall we? So a lot of people don't know what land transfer tax is. It does go straight to the government. It's applicable on closing. Can you tell me about it?
Yes, definitely. So land transfer tax applies anytime a person, corporation, whatever the case is, purchases, acquires land, any type of land in the province of Ontario. Now, we have the provincial Ontario land transfer tax. That's always based on the purchase price. We have a calculator that calculates that. And again, in my initial letter, I always, because I have the agreement of purchase and sale, I have the purchase price. So I am able to just calculate it quickly and advise the client, this is what you're looking at. This is your land transfer tax. But that's only Ontario land transfer tax applicable to properties in the province of Ontario. That applies always.
Yeah.
In addition to that, we have the City of Toronto municipal land transfer tax. So anytime you purchase a property in the City of Toronto, you have to pay double because the government, the Ontario government, will withdraw land transfer tax, Ontario portion, and then we have the municipality, City of Toronto, that will also withdraw their portion. So it's much, much more expensive to purchase properties in Toronto rather than outside of Toronto. So that's something to be mindful about. Of course, there is a first-time home buyer rebate.
Okay.
There are specific requirements to be eligible for this. First and foremost, you have to acquire the property and move in, and that property has to be your primary place of residence in order to be eligible. That's like number one question. You have to be a Canadian citizen. There's a list of requirements, but that's like the most important. And I noticed that clients purchase properties for investment purposes, to have a rental income. And then they don't realize that although they are first-time home buyers, like they never really own the property anywhere in the world, because that's what matters. It's not only in Canada, it's not only in Ontario, it's anywhere in the world. You can basically receive that first-time home buyer rebate if you have never owned any property anywhere in the world, but you have to move in, and clients don't realize that. They're like, no, we never owned a property anywhere in the world. But unfortunately, the Ministry of Finance has specific requirements to be eligible for that rebate. You can't just purchase it and have it as an investment property.
Yeah.
You won't be eligible. But if in the event that you do qualify for the first-time home buyer rebate, it does help.
Yeah.
It does help because it's $4,000 less the rebate. So, I had clients that actually based on the purchase price, the land transfer tax was, let's say, $4,030, and the $4,000 was deducted. So they really paid $30 in land transfer tax. It all depends on the purchase price again.
Yeah.
It's always based on that. That's our starting point to calculate that. But it does help a lot. So if someone's lucky, never owned a property anywhere in the world, they could definitely qualify, and that helps tremendously.
Absolutely.
That would be beneficial, definitely. But unfortunately, this is the cost of a real estate transaction, a purchase transaction, that the purchasers are responsible to cover. And I would definitely, I always try to highlight this fact because for some reason, people are not aware of this land transfer tax.
Yeah.
And the City of Toronto land transfer tax. They're not aware. So again, in my initial letter, I make sure that in my the field where I discuss my fees and disbursements, I always highlight that in addition to that, you are responsible for land transfer tax, and based on your purchase price, this is how much you will be paying on the day of closing. So I require, a lump sum in this amount. Of course, it's what I require is a little bit more because it has to cover other disbursements, but that is the, one of the biggest disbursements. So I always advise of that.
Absolutely, because it really could be a pretty penny for land transfer.
Yes, definitely. Sometimes it amounts to like 60,000 when it's in the City of Toronto. Again, depending on the purchase price.
Absolutely.
The more you pay, the more the purchase price is, the more the land transfer tax.
Yeah, based on purchase price and location.
Location, yes. So it's either outside or inside Toronto.
Exactly.
So that would be the difference.
Well, Svenya, I cannot thank you enough for your time. I know how busy you are. We're going to let you go, but I'm going to put all of the information, your information, just below. If anyone needs a real estate lawyer, she is phenomenal. Please reach out. But as always comment, like, and most importantly, please share this interview because this is a lot of information that people may not know. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.